Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Prep Your Standard NATO. Today's episode, I have Angela Bond with me. Angela, thank you so much for taking the time.
No problems. Glad to be.
So, Angela, you were in the Navy, right?
Yes, I'm still in the Navy. I'm in the reserves now.
Yep, okay. When you joined, were you a RAN or were you...
I joined as a RANS officer because there was no other option at the time. And in 1984, the Sex Discrimination Act came into being, and in 1985, all the RANS and RANS officers were transferred to the Royal Australian Navy.
How was that transition?
Pretty seamless. The Navy was certainly ahead of a lot of society in the fact that we had already undertaken a lot of training that the men undertook.
Yep.
I was on the second training cruise in 1980 that women went on. The first lot went for 4 days, we went for 3 weeks. Within a couple of years they were going for the full 6-week training cruise, and this all happened before the Sex Discrimination Act came into being. So really there was very little change.
Yeah.
And for a while there wasn't as much change as maybe we'd have liked with women going to sea. The first 2 women went to sea in about 1986.
Yep.
But then women were generally starting to be posted to sea in 1989, so things started moving fairly fast.
Right, so the Navy was quite on top of it. They were ready for it.
Defence was overall.
Fantastic.
Equal pay came in the late 1970s, so defence was pretty progressive.
It's really good to hear. You served at HMAS Moreton,
Which doesn't exist anymore.
right, and then on to Darwin.
Yes. I actually had a posting to HMAS Moreton straight after I finished my training and didn't really have a proper position, so I acted as the executive officer's assistant.
Yep.
But I actually had responsibilities and was actually given real jobs and things, which was great. Moreton wasn't very big. It was more a establishment set up to support the LCHs and also HMAS Tobruk, which were all home ported in Brisbane at the time, so it was in the river. And then I went to Canberra on posting, working with recruiting, and then I went to Darwin,
Great.
working with the reserves.
So what attracted you to joining the Navy in the first place?
I remember seeing photos of my uncles, and I had a great uncle, all in the army in the Second World War. And so that was always in the back of my mind. Never really thought of it as a career, but I had a brother in the army. How I ended up in the Navy was there was 12.5% youth unemployment in my country town of Echuca at the time.
Right.
We needed jobs.
Yep.
And in an evening where the local town had organised recruiters from all different organisations, including Defence, I got a double-sided piece of paper with print on it, and on the basis of that thought, this looks okay, and gave it a go.
All right. Well, I mean, it led to a pretty amazing career.
So it wasn't by design. It was, in a way, a bit of an accident.
Well, I mean, that's one hell of a career to come out of an accident.
Yeah, you never know where life takes you.
Yeah, that's true. So you got involved with the submarines at some point.
I was posted to HMAS Platypus when I was under training, and I think that was my love of submariners. I've always had a high respect for submariners with what they do, the conditions they live in, the isolation, etc. And then over the years had a number of interactions with them with pay cases, and I also ended up posted to HMAS Stirling here in Western Australia, and of course the submariners were here and I became their HR manager. So after all those years of Platypus and then 2 pay cases in different roles, and then the HR manager, I had a lot of interaction with them again. And I think that they, as a collective group, are probably one of the most highly trained, skilled collective groups of people that we have, and I have a great deal of respect for them.
Going to have to let my dad know that. He's a submariner himself, so I think he was actually part of the whole trial program of bringing women onto the submarines.
I was involved in the tail end of that. I was involved from the Canberra end, but the tail end of that from over here. And was there when the first women started going to sea.
Yep.
In submarines.
Yeah. Was there a big change to get women to submarines, or?
I think it was more along the lines of men understanding, or submariners understanding, that this was just the way it was.
Yep.
And there was a change management process put in place. There were opportunities for even spouses, wives, to ask questions. But at the end of the day, the Navy was moving so fast and so much in a positive direction that if it was something that needed to be done, did it need to be gender specific?
Yeah.
And if it wasn't, then we needed to get on with it and do something about it. It was hard for a while there to get a full cohort of people, as in enough women to make it viable.
Yep.
But it's just the way it is now.
Fair enough. I mean, as I always say to my dad, it takes a special kind of crazy to go down in a submarine. And let's face it, men are generally a little crazier than women.
Yeah.
You became part of Fleet Base West, and eventually you grew to running Fleet Base West?
Well, and I go HMAS Stirling because HMAS Stirling is actually bigger than just Fleet Base West.
Yep.
Fleet Base West is the wharves and the support of the wharves and that. But HMAS Stirling's got training, it's got a dive team, it has the submarines and the ships, and armaments depot. There's a small, very small air ground, but it's quite a complex beast, HMAS Stirling. There's quite a lot to it. I came over here as the HR manager for the Submariners, and always thought this would be a really good job, CEO at Stirling. So I thought, that's something to aim for. And in between, it became from a commander's to a captain's position. I thought, that probably counts me out. But I came back 4 years after leaving and took on a job as the base support manager, which nobody was really keen on. It was not an easy job.
Yep.
And then I was selected as EXO, Executive Officer, when I hadn't actually applied for the position, but apparently a number of years earlier I had. So anyhow, I ended up as Executive Officer. But I had the opportunity to deploy, so I did deploy to the Middle East.
Yep.
And as the J1, dealing with any people issues, whether it be from making sure the right skill sets are in the theatre to returning deceased.
Yep.
And then I went to Canberra for a couple of years dealing with pay cases, being involved with remuneration for our admirals right down through to recruits. And then I applied for a position as commanding officer, which I was fortunate enough to be selected for.
From what I've seen noted around, you were the first female CO.
Yes. I was the second female executive officer and the first female commanding officer of HMAS Stirling.
How did that feel?
Well, for me, I just did my job.
Yep.
And I also said to people, I'm a naval captain, I just happen to be a woman.
Yep.
And that's how I approached the job. I've never felt... I don't know how to feel different. I don't know what it feels like to be different. But here in WA, I used to go to functions or commemorative events or whatever, and I'd have these people coming up and saying, isn't that wonderful? After leaving the Navy, I probably had a better understanding of how significant it was. The role I'd undertaken, I probably appreciated it less. But what I can say is about within defence, and in my case in the Navy, it doesn't matter what your gender, colour, creed or any of those sort of things are, it's how well you do your job.
Yep.
And so I never saw any difference in particularly the later years. Early years, yes, there was a difference. It was a different time and age. But in the later years, gender was not an issue. So my selection for command was based on what I could bring to the job, the experience I had to bring to the job, the opportunities I'd had, and what I could contribute as an individual with the benefit of all the training, education and experience, as opposed to the gender. So I personally never saw the gender as an issue. I saw my background as being the reason why I was in the role.
Absolutely. I mean, your background, if anyone really wants to delve into the depths of it, and you can see most of it online, to be honest, is quite extensive, and you've obviously got the skills to get the position you need to go to. I kind of feel like you should be working for Defence Force recruiting right now because I'm feeling a little inspired.
I love my time in the Navy, and had a few circumstances being different, I could very well still be in the Navy full time. But having spent 2.5 years away from my family straight, I decided that I needed to be with my family. And my youngest was going into Year 11, and every time one of our 4 children went into Year 11, we moved. And I don't think anything was ever easy, or we made it more difficult because of moving.
Yeah.
So I was away the second last child all through Year 11 and 12, and decided I'd be there at least for one of them without moving.
Yep. Fair enough. But yeah, it's not easy being a military kid and getting picked up and dragged around the country.
No.
How did you find being a mum and having this career?
I was actually married twice, and first time round it was a fellow military officer, And that was probably a bit more difficult because in those days you had to nominate who the career member was, and depending on your circumstances you could be considered less useful, valuable, and that's how you felt if you had to say you weren't the career member, as opposed to your abilities or value or whatever. But in later years I had the benefit of an extremely supportive spouse, and for those 2.5 years when I was deployed and then lived in Canberra, my husband had 3 of our 4 children at home, one in uni, one in secondary school and one in primary school, and he managed brilliantly. I have to say, number 2 child, she did a lot of caring and helping out at home as well.
Yep.
She's a young adult and did her fair share.
Great. It's wonderful that you had that support to do that, because it's not easy being away from your family like that.
Not at all. But it doesn't make it easy for spouses, male or female, it doesn't really matter. But when you pick somebody up and move them across the country and they know nobody, they have no connections in the community, and particularly at the time with my husband being moved, he knew nobody. I was 6 months pregnant when we moved, and then he was home with a 4-year-old and then a 4-year-old and an infant for 15 months. It was pretty tough on him, and I always acknowledge that.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good call. A lot of people don't take the time to acknowledge the support of the home base. And,
absolutely. Yeah. If my family didn't support me, I couldn't have done half the things I did.
Do you have any advice that you'd like to give people who are thinking about joining the military?
Give it a go.
Yep.
But it's not right for everybody. There are people that should never join the military for whatever reason.
Yep.
There can be various reasons. But if you've got an inkling that you think it's right for you, give it a go. My mother had 8 children. 3 of us joined the military, 2 Army, myself in the Navy, and 1 brother was a policeman. And she would always say joining the military is a good start to life. So if nothing else, it's a good start to life. You could stay in for your minimal period and have experiences that other people will never have.
Yep.
And it just puts you in a really good place for the rest of your life. When I was in command, I used to go up to the graduations at the police academy, and it's amazing how many former military people were on parade passing out as police. So these individuals had a really good start. They had the discipline, they had the dress and bearing, and took responsibility, and had a great secondary career ahead of them because of their military service.
I've seen that quite a lot. A lot of ex-military roll over into some form of emergency services. It just seems quite natural.
And I dare say it's not that the military necessarily makes the person, but adds to the person. You have a certain set of characteristics and aspects of yourself that make you right for the military too.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to round this out?
Oh, look, all I can say is for me, from the time I joined the Navy to the time I left, I understood the need to take opportunities, do things other people didn't necessarily want to do, do something different, and look at it as an adventure as opposed to not all aspects of military service are great, far from it, but it's an adventure, and there's always something different, and the varied opportunities you get as a military person are fantastic compared to rocking up to an office every day.
Great. Why isn't Defence Force Recruiting tapping on your door? Because I want to go sign up now.
Go for it.
Thank you so much for your time.
No problems. Thanks, Shay.
This podcast was edited, published and produced by the RSLWA. Head to www.rslwa.org.au for other content. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook.